Okay. All right. So hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to today's webinar. I'm Kate Cahill. I'm the Associate Director of High Performance Computing at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and I'm part of the Computational and Data Science Curriculum Exchange project. And I want to thank you all for attending our spring webinar series. So this is going to be our final webinar in this series. So we're really excited to hear from Professor Terry Platt. But I wanted to point out that we have other activities, particularly one coming up later this month, is our annual symposium. So this is an opportunity to spend a few days in person, working with other faculty, people who are interested in talking about computational and data science curriculum, and coming up with ideas or discussing needs, and discussing tools and materials that are available to add more of these type of topics to your courses or develop courses. And so we're really hoping to see a good community come together and discuss these things. So this is going to be at Clark Atlanta University at the end of this month. So it'll be 3 days, the week right after Memorial Day. So there is travel funding available. If you're interested, you can register. So the registration deadline is May the 5th. And you can I'll put this link in the chat, or you can use the QR code, and that will bring you to the application form that you can fill out, and we can get back to you with information about travel funding if you're interested, or you can contact me to find out if you have any questions about the event or any other activities we have. So I'll put in the chat now. So this is our project webpage, and so the information about the symposium and how to apply is on that project webpage, as well as my contact information if you have any questions. And so now we're going to hear from Professor Terry Platt, also from Clark Atlanta University, and she's Associate Professor of
Public administration. I know.
Public administration. I'm like, public affairs. No, public administration. Thank you. And her talk is using computational science for data storytelling. So thank you very much, Terry, for offering to do this talk. And you can go ahead and share your screen and get started.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me share it really quickly. And there you go. Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this talk. I think data storytelling is always very interesting when we think about ways that we can communicate with diverse populations in terms of like diversity of interest, diversity of skill set, with understanding the information that you may be trying to convey. And so storytelling helps to pull individuals in to help them contextualize whatever it is you're trying to share, but it can also help individuals to understand the significance of the work. And so just to give a little overview of the talk, these are some of the points that I'll share, tell you a little bit about me and how I got into this whole data storytelling vein. And then we'll talk a little bit more about like what is data storytelling and why should we use it. We'll talk about ways and strategies to develop stories as well as computational approaches. I'll go over and share a little bit of sources for data because you might already have your own data, and there's just so much out there. And then I'll give you some examples about like how I've done it, and then we'll talk about some ways that you can also do it. So okay. Let's see if I can get it to, there we go. So just to share a little bit about me, just kind of telling you, it's kind of one flows into the next in terms of some of the ways that I access data and the types of data stories that I have had to tell. So while I am in the Department of Public Administration, I wear a lot of hats at Clark Atlanta University. So one is I'm a faculty affiliate with our Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development with community outreach and engagement and helping to translate the work of our basic researchers to a community individuals to help them to understand the significance of the work. Additionally, I'm the director of the honors program, so I help support students with a lot of research activities, as well as career exploration and academic development and academic excellence. But I also work as a faculty affiliate with our data science initiative. Seems like a whole lot of hats, but they all work together in my world. To me, to explore data in some interesting ways, to explore research, and to get other people excited about the concept of research and the activity of research, which is where data storytelling comes in. And so I've had a few fellowships, currently have one, and I've had one in the past with Aim Ahead, which is through the NIH, which focuses on artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to look at ways that we can address health-related concerns. And then I've also had one with University of California, Irvine, looking at voter engagement, student voter engagement, particularly on college campuses. How do we get students to register to vote? That's it. And so I think it's really interesting to see how all of that has worked together to lead to research projects and funding through a number of sources, including the National Institutes of Health, the National Endowment for Humanities, and the Teagle Foundation. Now, in order to complete these projects, I've needed to access data, and I've needed to share. One of the roles of sharing of grant work is that you have to disseminate. And so some of the ways that I've been able to access data and in order for me to engage in data storytelling, and this is just a few that I have now, but I've worked with lots of data, and you'll see, is with MedStar Health in terms of accessing electronic health records for the AI ML components. Also with Ocean, which also does electronic health records, and then Terra, which provides open access to health records, cancer center, health records, a lot of work with health. So I think it's just really interesting that, we can pull data in, but also work with a lot of available data, CDC, census data, community and neighborhood level data, and then also some data that we collect ourselves. And so I think it's just really interesting when we look at how we can take our situations, our research opportunities, our communication opportunities in order to share that information and find some interesting ways to connect people to the work. And so that's where data storytelling comes in. So I try to tell data stories all the time because I am always communicating with populations who have differing skill levels. And so when I'm talking about data storytelling, I'm talking about communicating effectively so that you can share your insights from a data set or multiple data sets using narratives and visualizations. And so sometimes you may come across information that talks about data storytelling, and it focuses primarily on the visualizations. But I think it's part of the storytelling. You can't just leave the storytelling out of the data, and then it's not data storytelling. And so you have to include the storytelling component, which is the narratives, to help contextualize and to provide a perspective on how one should understand the phenomena, identify and understand the relationships that you've identified, or even understand the challenge that you may be trying to address through your work. So we think about three components: data, narrative, and visualizations. And so when I think about the data, we'll come back, we're going to work with this concept of data a lot, as well as visualizations a lot. But when we think about data, you want to be as thorough and accurate in your with the data that you're working with. You don't want to tell an old story. You want to tell the current story. So you want to work with the best data that you can in order to serve to serve as a foundation for whatever that story is that you're trying to share. And so, but when we think about like how we're analyzing that data, we can do it in ways that are descriptive, that are diagnostic, predictive, or prescriptive. And so depends on the story you want to tell, which is when we get to the narrative. So what is your storyline? What is the what is that? What is the thesis? What is the point of the whole narrative that you're trying to share? It can matter who your audience is in terms of how are you trying to spur them to action, whether that action is further research, uh, deeper analysis, contextual understanding, application of funding. I mean, there may be your audience can help to dictate what your narrative or your how your storyline is developed. Every story doesn't resonate with every group, but that doesn't mean that your data doesn't have a story to tell. And so, as the researcher, as the presenter, that's something you need to work with your data in order to glean the insights from the data and to communicate it in a way that helps to share context, level set as it relates to that context, and then inspire your audience in the ways that are appropriate for your work. Then we get to the visualization component. You must have some type of visual representation in the data story. You know, well, we don't really do picture books as adults. We do a lot of pictures with data. And so in terms of some type of visual representation, whether it's a graph, a chart, a map, 2D, 3D, some augmented reality, something to help visualize the data, to pull people into the narrative, because that is the compelling component of the entire exercise. So then we think about so why use data storytelling? Why can't we just present the data? I mean, I guess you could, but why would you when you can tell a whole story? And so that's when we get to the psychology of storytelling. I'm telling you, you'll lose them sometimes when you're just giving information off of a spreadsheet. You know, we've been there where sometimes the information, the data itself is compelling, but the presentation is not. You know, when people are rattling off just numbers. But if you're trying to pull people in to evoke a response, if you want them to remember the whole trajectory of the action of the research activity, if you want them to feel motivated or compelled towards an action, storytelling will assist in that process. And so when we think about some of the psychological impacts of storytelling, it gets the brain going. People are problem solving. They're thinking of strategies and approaches that may, some individuals visualize data in their minds, even aside from what you may be presenting. And so they may be able to have some of this neural coupling of story to context to data to future action. It can help develop a level of empathy, particularly if you're working with human subjects or you're talking about the lived reality of a population as a part of a broader data activity, to move it from just being numbers on a page to being a story about a community, to being a story about a state or individuals who may be impacted by a particular reality. This can be very meaningful in that data storytelling component because it helps to humanize your individuals. The other thing too is when we think about helping to make meaning, identify patterns, provide that broader context, bring in some additional information that may not exactly be in the data, but help to shape how we understand the data. And so, and it can also help to simplify the communication of very complex information. I mean, now data can be really complex but we are able to, through visualizations, share a lot of information fairly simply or in a very straightforward way, or ways that allow individuals to consume complex information in ways that are very straightforward, clear, and concise. And I think that's some of what storytelling can do. I like this visual, so I wanted to share it with you because it talks about some of the other elements or components when we're thinking about data storytelling. So again, we talked about you got to have that data, you have to have the data visualization, knowing which insights to extract. So when we're thinking about the data science component and the computational component, you bring your skills to bear in terms of understanding, working with the data, manipulating the data to see what can be gleaned and what is the best way to tell that story. So the narrative and the visualizations coming together from my perspective in terms of how do you communicate this information? How are you sharing the story between causality about the relationships that may exist? And how are you helping to construct a visual understanding of that, the visual relationships between that? Now, when we think about relationships in this instance, who are your stakeholders? Again, who are you trying to communicate that information with, to, for, et cetera. And so I think relationships do matter in this activity. So now we get to some of the steps to developing a good data story. So I try to break it down into 8 steps. Walk with me. So the first one is find the story within the data. So this is where your computational work really comes in handy. So it's not enough just to have the data. You must have worked with the data to see what is it telling you? What relationships are there? What correlations are present? What other kinds of information are coming through the analytics that you're engaging in? And so how you construct the narrative can be impacted by what is gleaned from that data. So you want to see what it tells you, what emerges from the information. The next thing is consider your audience. Again, like as I mentioned before, who you're talking to and who you're talking about can make a difference in what you highlight in the story. Not just the visualizations that you provide, but the complexity of the analysis that you share. And so there may be times when your audience is most interested in the technical complexity of the algorithms, of the algorithmic design, of some of your all the different steps that you may have taken in order to reach your findings, your conclusion. Where there may be other groups that you are communicating your information with that are only interested in your findings. What is your question and what was primarily your findings? Because this is the next steps that where they need to start thinking about. So what next? What then am I going to do? So some are interested in the implications, where some are interested in the applications. And so that can inform how you develop the story and how you tell the story. The other is, I think, deciding after you've done all that data work, after you've done all this analysis work, what is the most important? You will end up with, and in many instances, sometimes you have too much. I'm going to say too much, but you have a lot. You have a lot to work with. But you need to be concise about what data story you want to tell so that your meaning doesn't get diluted, or your purpose for the entire narrative or the entire story doesn't get lost in the telling. And so you don't want them to get distracted and go off on a lot of tangents. That doesn't mean that you don't have a lot of interesting things to share, but that may mean that as you're telling the story, or as you're deciding how to tell the story, you need to filter out what is the most important, what is tangential, and how can you connect them to tell the best story. It might be that you have to tell 2 or 3 stories. It may be that there are chapters within your book in terms of telling the story. And so, but the point is, you don't want to overwhelm your listener with too much information that is not relevant to the key point that you're trying to, or key goals that you're trying to achieve. The fourth one is analyze data and find insights. Seems pretty straightforward, but it's not just, and if your goal or your purpose is to give descriptives, then that's great. But there's still place for you to dig deep into your data and to do the science and the work that is true to your inquiry and to share that information. So data storytelling is not glossing over the depth of analysis that researchers and scholars can bring, but is making sure that as you're sharing that information out, you're doing so that has fidelity to your purpose and to the overall, as I say, over the overall narrative that you're trying to construct or convey. The number 5 is find the most effective data visualizations. There are so many data visualization tools out there. There's so many. So you can work within Python. High performance computing can produce some wonderful 2D, 3D, immersive, augmented reality visualizations. I mean, there's a lot out there. But you need to pick. It's not just trying to make it pretty. Yeah, that matters. But it also matters that it is the best strategy or the best way to communicate what you're trying to convey. So it might be that you need a dashboard, right? So that it's interactive. It might mean that you have a map, just a static map. It might be that you use charts and tables. It might be that it's an immersive experience. And so there are so many different strategies for data visualization. But again, what concepts are you trying to convey? What relationship are you trying to share? Are you trying to provide an experience, an immersive experience through the data? And so what's the best way and the most effective way for doing that? And I'll give some examples a little bit later. And then provide context. The data itself, as we know, is not enough. And that you need to weave your data insights with context together. How are we understanding the selection of your data? And what does that mean for the data storytelling? Does time matter for the data that you're sharing? If so, that helps to shape the context. Are you comparing and contrasting different points in time or different or comparable realities? So then that may be something that you need to share in terms of helping us to understand the broader context. There may be a whole series of variables, especially if you're talking about people, where they from, age, all that demographic data and information. There may also be circumstantial and situational realities that help to inform the story so that we can have a greater appreciation for what is being communicated through the data. And then at number 7, now we get to constructing your story. All that pre-work, I think, helps to make the story rich, meaningful, memorable, and impactful. And so when we're thinking about structuring a good data story, think about some of the best stories that you've heard. They've had an introduction, right? Some rising action, something is starting to build. There's maybe some tension that's present. Doesn't always have to be a conflict, but there may be some tensions or a challenge that's there. There is a climax, the falling action, and a resolution. So that's just a standard storytelling process, but that can still work to help you construct your data story. Is to follow and structure based on this, kind of like this formula. It might be that you don't have attention, but there is a climax, a high point in in what you're trying to share. Instead of it being a resolution, there may be some actionable recommendations. And so, you want to make the modifications that are relevant for, again, your narrative, your story, but to have a structure that is that runs parallel to how people understand a story to be told, helps it to be memorable and impactful and serve as a useful device for evaluating research. So I always leverage the familiar, capitalize on that understanding that people have for story framework and use it to move your data story forward. And then the last step in, I think, the data storytelling framework is to edit. Make sure it's clear, make sure it's concise, it's clean and to the point. It's not always, sometimes you got to step away, get a little distance from the story. Maybe you need to present it once or twice or a few times. And through the questions and answers, you'll get a better understanding of what your audience considers to be critical or crucial. But you do want to try to refine it so that you are telling a clear story, that is a concise story, and that it has the impact, it makes the point that you want it to make. And as I say, sometimes there may be more than one story that needs to be told. And so it might be that through this editing process that you are not eliminating information, but that you may have an opportunity to share an additional or a second story. So when we think about some of the computational approaches, so there's data visualization, as I say, is a key component of data storytelling. But I think it's important first to think about some of these elements up here that I have: focus, technique, goals, and output. So when we think about the focus, what is when you think about it from a computational lens, how are you planning to engage in analysis? What are you planning to analyze? What variables are meaningful for you? What insights are you trying to derive? And how are you interpreting this information? How are you how is all that working together to streamline the focus of the work, right? Because that's most important. That's more important than I think telling a story, but because that undergirds the story. Then thinking about what techniques. So you may use what we consider to be some of the statistical analyses approaches that are standard and understood within your discipline, or within the area of inquiry that you use. You may choose to use AI ML. There may be some other visuals or visualization techniques and tools that you use. But what is your technique for, within your computational approach? Because that can impact what future visualization that you may use in order to share, to support your storytelling. What are your goals? In terms of like looking at patterns, trends, relationships? Is there a problem that you're trying to solve? Are you laying out, these are the facts, this is the reality, this is what we currently see, more so than this is what I am prescribing as a future activity, or this is a predictive understanding of what behavior can be if given these choices or these variations of interventions. But then also thinking about output. So we think about what insights are you wanting to share? What reports must you construct, or do you need to construct, as well as what visualizations can help push that, share your computational insights. So when we think about data visualization strategies, you can look at automated visualizations. There are quite a few software applications or technology applications that support automated visualizations. You put them in, it will produce a chart type based off of the type of data that is contained within and the trends that can be found. You can do this within Python. You can do, there's so many. You can do it within RPosit. There's things that you can do, but you can also look at interactive dashboards. Number of websites that have that provide public access to data sets have interactive dashboards that can be used or integrated into your communication or into your data story to support your work. It might be that you are constructing the interactive dashboard yourself. You can do it within Tableau. There are so many different ways that you can help use an interactive engagement with the data to allow individuals to drill deeper into particular components in order to support their understanding of the story or of the narrative. And then also when we think about some dynamic visualizations, things that may change over time, that are responding in real time, that can also support the narrative, depending on your work. Some other data visualizations, of course, augmented reality, an immersive visualization environment, and then also simulations. So when I think about some key computational aspects within these approaches, of course, your algorithm matters. In terms of identifying the trends, identifying the patterns. How are you training your data? Is it ethical? Is it inclusive? Is it what the level of accuracy and representativeness? We think about data mining in terms of thinking about how we're going to cluster our variables or cluster our data. When we think about associations, how we're going to treat some of the complexities that may show up in our data that need to be addressed or accounted for. Maybe even hidden connections and relationships in the data that, we can talk about or help to contextualize within our story that we are seeing as we are working at a fundamental level of organizing our data for deeper analysis. And then also think about natural language processing, because data can be in so many different types and ways. So you might be working with text. So looking at text generation through natural language processing techniques to help construct that narrative and that narrative framework within your data. So I've worked with focus groups and interviews, and we've had to, kind of pull out from the language and, the stories that people are telling us about their experiences within healthcare situations or health challenges, and trying to use that in order to help tell a story about their health choices, some of the choices that they have made, that they've some of the options that they've been confronted with and the choice they made as a result, and the implications for themselves and for their overall health outcomes, quality of life. And so pulling out the meaning from that text in order to tell that story, even though I may have great data through the evaluation of electronic health records, is not telling me the story of choices and maybe constrained options that individuals may see themselves faced with, but may matter for when we're thinking about how can we assist or support them in their health decision making and health choices. And so, so I think about some of the sources of data. These are just a few I listed. I mean, there's a lot out there. I do enjoy working with data.gov, and because there's a lot of data there. The U.S. Census Bureau and other governmental data that one may be able to find. Now, granted, some data may come up and come down, but I think there's still some meaningful data that's out there at the state level, local level, national level that can help with data storytelling, if even just to help provide context. And then also we think about some of the health and scientific data, working with Terra, CDC data, OpenFDA, healthdata.gov. And then also, never underestimate what you can find out through social media. So in terms of looking at Google Trends, just type in Google Trends and whatever key terms you're interested in, and it will pull up some, give you access to some interesting data. Then also when we look at X, former Twitter APIs, in terms of looking at search codes and tags, you may be able to pull up and find some interesting data there. I don't do a lot with social media as a data source, but I work with people who do. And so, and I have been really impressed with how they've been able to harness social media data for larger analysis and helping to tell a story or contextualize a phenomenon. And then also there are research centers like Harvard and just data that are available from research activities through, Harvard. Most people know about Harvard Dataverse, the Pew Research Center allows you to have access to their data. And then University of Michigan, ICPSR, the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. And there's more, ISR, Institute for Social Research, and others. But these are just some of the ones that I've worked with in order to construct data stories, either as a part of summer research experiences with students, as a part of my efforts to communicate to community, as a part of research projects that may be grant affiliated or fully grant funded. And so, so I did want to provide a couple of examples. Everybody lives for the examples. And so these are not ones that I have constructed myself, although I have used them as examples to guide some of my work and to help explain data storytelling. I will next, after this slide, I will pivot and show some of what I've done with my work. Some of them I cannot share because I need a pre-approval from OCHIN or MedStar because it utilizes their data, but I try to give some examples of data storytelling so you can think in a broad way of different strategies for how to tell the story or different approaches for contextualizing your own data for telling a data story. Okay, so this one is looking at homelessness in America. And I thought it was really interesting because they take a series of charts, impactful charts, to help construct the narrative. So I'm gonna try to show, hopefully you should be able to see websites. Okay, and so I thought this was interesting because they use a story in 10 charts. And so they are showing state by state what homelessness, the total homelessness count, what it looks like. There's also a discussion about drilling a little bit deeper. And so they look at specific states. They give you an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper and drill down into that data, which one may do. And then also it goes a little bit deeper into what constitutes a homeless population, those who are sheltered and those who are unsheltered. And so, helping to provide depth and understanding, and then looking at other areas and other communities that have homelessness as a challenge. And one of the things that I appreciate about this, like this blog or this story, is that they're using this isn't like a super sexy data visualizations, but they still are meaningful because they're providing data evidence and data support for the narrative. It's not that they're just saying, I think, I feel, but here is some information, and they're using narrative and context to help establish context and to explain the relation and connection between the visualizations. And so there are interactive dashboards when you go to some of these sub-sites where they're helping to construct the narrative. And one of the things that I do appreciate as well about like this effort at data storytelling is that a lot of they're pulling from multiple data sources, and they take you back to the original through their links, where you can drill down and dig a little bit deeper through these interactive dashboards in order to evaluate and gain personalized understanding and depth of meaning through them. Let me see if I can go back to my, okay. Oop. Okay, and so this one I think is interesting because this is a tool that I've used before as well, which is shorthand in order to provide an example of data storytelling. And so in this one was prepared by Nature, the magazine, and it's talking about like, how can we think about the brain and exploring, providing information about concepts. We've done something similar around prostate cancer in order to help individuals visualize and understand where is the prostate, what is prostate cancer, and how it can impact the prostate and impact the body, and then why certain health treatments might be options for them, as well as thinking about ways in which eating healthy can impact, their overall health and quality of life. And so it's what's interesting is it's kind of, you kind of have to keep scrolling through it, and it provides some narrative and some text, but it also provides these visualizations that can be supported. And so you end up seeing some of these pictorial representations that align with other broader data. And so you're able to kind of share and communicate some complex visualizations for some in a way that allows you to insert that context and understanding for your viewer, for your audience. And so that's something that I do like about this resource. This is the only one that can do it, but this is one that I think is pretty accessible. And this, I think it's a pretty handy example. And so the last one is one that I've used quite a bit, and this is using resources through the CDC in order to create data dashboards fairly quickly in order to show impact, community-based impact, and to provide context. Some of the information that I've used in the past is no longer accessible or no longer visible, but I'm going to still show you some anyway. So this one was the heat and health tracker, and so you're able to engage the dashboards. You see by state, see by indicators. Look at a particular community, a particular level of risk. You can create your own dashboards, pulling in CDC data. One is able to construct these also using Tableau. Often I'm working with undergraduates and a few graduate students in these activities. And so their abilities may vary. And so often I'm tasked with showing them multiple ways to meet goals and objectives of engaging in data storytelling. And so although this site isn't maintained, but this is an example of some of what we're able to, what one may be able to do. So we're going to go back, but you're able to view an existing dashboard, but you're also able to create dashboards using the CDC and using Tableau. There's a little bit of a startup cost for those who may use Tableau if you haven't used it before. I think do what works best for your situation. But I do like Tableau because it does allow you to embed the dynamic dashboards within your data story, your presentation. But if you want to produce or provide access to an interactive, but through a portal, you can use one of the ones through the CDC or a similar website that allows for data exploration. Or you can use one of the created dashboards that is already kind of tailored or produce a static representation. And so these are just some examples. Now, when I think about how I've embedded data storytelling in my courses, I've used Policy Map. Some of my best data stories are through TED Talks, right? When I'm sharing them with students, I work with data from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, and then also NetLogo Web in terms of just trying to provide a series of tools for students. My goal with some of my curriculum design has been to include lectures with data visualization to support storytelling. Usually the midterm exam or the final exam includes a storytelling component where students are taking the concepts that we've covered in the course, and they are working with some data that they've been exposed to, or working with deeply or to some level of depth in the course, regardless of subject and level, where I work with freshmen all the way through graduate students. And so we're working with data, with, as I said, with differing levels of depth, and they're constructing a data story to help me to understand how well they understand their exposure to data, how well they're understanding the connection between some of the core concepts and maybe policy work or phenomena with the data, so that it kind of breathes life, and they have to engage in that activity. And I also provide readings and support for them, resources through Canvas, which is our learning management system, in order to support their work. So there's a lot of to-do activities, some step-by-step like tutorials and labs that students can do in order to help build some basic skills. So break it down by skill, so that they can produce a visualization, at least 1 to 3 visualizations, depends on the complexity of it, and the story that they're trying to tell in order to tell that story. So this is a sample of what one assignment has looked like. I work with neighborhood data with students often, because public administration often teach from a local policy perspective, or some issues that can manifest at the local level. So we're pulling in information with the Google Forms, because many of the students, we're pulling in some of the pulling in responses, we're pulling in Google Sheets. We work with Python, but the students are assigned a neighborhood planning unit where they have to pull in the different data about their planning unit and help to provide some context, help us to understand what is the story of this neighborhood planning unit, and then to create some visualizations and some based on the information that they have. Everyone has access through the neighborhood nexus to data about their neighborhood planning unit. So in Atlanta, the neighborhoods are given neighborhood planning unit codes. So NPU A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Each student is assigned a neighborhood planning unit, which is like a community, and then they are producing these visualizations. Many students use the interactive website. Some students do not, and they're able to extract the information into Python and build on some of the skills that they have or that they've been working with. And then they have to give a presentation. So they're sharing the data with their classmates in discussion. They're sharing the data sets that they may have constructed. And so they are responsible for telling the story. And so it is helpful, I think, in breaking down some of the fear that I have with students, or that students may have, and using statistical concepts outside of statistically defined courses. But there's so much that data and facts can do for helping to contextualize a phenomenon or a reality outside of like statistics or data analytics course. And then this is another example of data storytelling that I do with some of my graduate students, but also I've done it with a version of this activity with incoming freshmen during our summer programs. So we work with data from the Prostate Cancer Registry, which is from the Center for Cancer Research and Therapeutic Development, as well as the CDC National Environmental Public Health Tracking Network. And the students have learned, so one of the goals was to teach them Python, but then also how to just work with data in general. And we did it through data storytelling. Now, in this activity, we only had 5 days. And so I know, right? 5 days to get it all done. But these are some of the steps that we followed in order to, in terms of outlining it, some of the learning objectives and goals. I do give you access to them, and I shared the slides with Kate, but I wanted to show you just a little bit more. No. So, okay, I gotta go. Let me double check that link because it let me down. And so, yeah. So this is an example of, this is a little bit the same one where you can download it and use it for yourself. But this is the final presentation that my students who did it for the 5 days in the summer program. They call themselves the Data Destroyers. Love it. And they came from schools, Morehouse and Spelman. I'm at Clark Atlanta, and I work with them, and we pulled data from a variety of sources, engaged in data analytics, using all of these tools at some point during our 5 days. These are just some of the tasks that they were able to complete in terms of working with downloading the data into Excel spreadsheets, organizing it, and structuring it so that we can then put it into Python and then run some analysis to create charts, as well as working with the user interfaces that are in the CDC site. And then so they identified the variables that they selected for analysis and investigation. Some of the some other variables are complementary variables that helped us to construct the narrative and the story through the Prostate Cancer Registry. There was quite a few open-ended questions, as well as social behavioral questions and attitudes, and then just some of the coding work and some of the maps that they were able to produce. Most of the discussion or the narrative was provided orally in a presentation, but they did type up their conclusion and outline what are some future steps and activities that they wanted to undertake. And so I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate data storytelling in a variety of contexts, particularly as it relates to teaching and students and curriculum. But as I say, you can also use it as a researcher to communicate with audiences beyond the classroom, whether it's community, other researchers, et cetera. And so I hope this has been helpful for you. And thank you so much for your time. So I'm just going to stop. I think that was my last slide. Yep. So I'm going to stop sharing and answer any questions if there are any.
Perfect. So anybody is able to post a question, or I think you can unmute now and ask a question. Maybe. I will. All right. Yeah, Juan.
Hi, good afternoon. So I was wondering, in Python, besides the Matplotlib, do you have any other libraries that you use for data visualization?
I do. I'll have to share them with you. I have a whole what I share with my students as depends on the type of what they're trying to do. But I am working with students in Matplotlib, so I call it lib with them in order to do the data visualizations, given the time and some of the constraints. But I personally work with more, so but I can share them.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'll share them with Kate, and then you can go through and see what may work best for you.
Yeah, because I'm currently doing research with a couple of students, and they have to prepare posters pretty soon. And so we typically stick to Matplotlib, but it'd be interesting to see some other options.
Okay, will do. I found that Matplotlib usually meets the goals or the objectives that I'm needing, and so, but I do have more. So, but I'd have to look. I can't recall them off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. So far, Matplotlib has done what we need, so it's been great. But it's never hurts to view other
Right.
options.
Understand.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jung Yu?
Thank you very much for your presentation. My questions for you is that when I try to plan this kind of group work, the main difficulty that I often encounter with is that they have really different level of coding skills, backgrounds, data usage skills, all those things. So oftentimes, what I found is that one of the leader of that team feels so tired of leading the whole team. And given that I also have limited capability to deal with all teams at the same time, struggling with the data, because the data are so idiosyncratic, right? So sometimes they might choose some context that I'm not familiar with, something like that. So I wonder how you handle those kind of situations. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So do a survey at the beginning of class to assess skill level. And I try not, I know this might seem harsh, but I try not to match up the strongest with my weakest. I know that typically people do, but to your point, often the strongest carries the load, or the one students who are more knowledgeable. So in order to make sure that they still have opportunities to grow and enjoy the assignment, I tend to group them together for their own projects. And then the students who are more development in a more developmental phase with their assignments, they're grouped together. And so in some instances, I have had to work with graduate assistants in order to help me manage the multiple research projects. But when I do not have a graduate assistant, everybody's doing the same thing at the same time. Everybody's doing the exact same thing. So the same variables, we're all working on telling the same story. But it may be told differently, and there may just be maybe one variable difference. In some instances that I've used with students, pretty large classes, but I just reduce the number of differing elements in the assignments for the groups if I'm not able to handle it. But that is something I struggle with as well, is the balance. But the students do enjoy the activity. It's just trying not to overburden those students who come to the courses with greater skill levels or higher skill levels. I do provide workshops and tutorials and modules within the Canvas LMS so that students can help to teach and train themselves to build their capacity if I don't have time to get to them.
Gotcha. So when you have limited capabilities, you ask them to use the same data, but come up with different ideas so that each team might talk about something different.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Alam, you can go ahead.
I would like to say a really excellent talk. You grabbed my attention from the very beginning to the end. I don't have specific question. I enjoyed all of it, but I would like, if it is possible, to share with us the student project that you showed us at the end, through the project itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I definitely will. I'll share everything that I shared today, including the links. I'll include them on a separate sheet to give to Kate so that you can access them on your own. And I would definitely share the assignment that I shared. And if I have extra assignments, that I think make sense, I will share them as well.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. Linda.
Hi, Terry. This is Linda.
Hi.
How are you? Thank you so much. This was really an awesome presentation. I do have a question. You alluded to it in your talk about the instability of some of the sites now, where during this phase with the Dodge people, some sites have gone offline, they've come back online. But I thought there was, and I don't know if you know the name or the site, there was a group that was actually preserving some of those sites so that you could still get to the data. And have you gone to that to use that at all?
I've been trying, so I've been able to find some in GitHub, and so
Okay.
that are accessible or links through GitHub, but I have not reliably. I call them data arcs, and so where they have
Yeah.
like, put it in the arc and close the door, and it's just it is. And so I'm working to upload some of my links. I found a few, but for CDC data, but I haven't found it for everything that has been for all the different data sets that have been impacted. I haven't found all of them yet. So if anyone else has located them, I am open and receptive because as you see, I work a lot with CDC data and some of the information, the sites are just
Yeah, that was actually one of the sites I was thinking about because we'll be doing our summer student program with the PERC conference in July.
mhm.
And we haven't picked a theme, but in the past we've actually done maternal and infant mortality and morbidity, where you really rely heavily on like CDC data. And so I don't know if we'll adjust our themes based on what is available in terms of trying to identify what projects the students will work on. But yeah, that is one challenge. But yeah, maybe Kate, there's something we could put on our site too,
Mhm.
where it that identifies where some of those alternative places are to find those data sets that have been brought down.
Yeah, yeah,
And
definitely. If we can gather that, if people have those links, we can, post them on our site and, hang on to those.
yeah, because that's the because when I've worked with faculty, that's one of the first things they say is we want an easy place to go get the data, right, to construct the activity. And I'm going, well, it used to be easy to say, and now it's a little bit tougher.
It's a lot. Yes, it is tougher. So with some of the materials, I'll share the GitHub locations that I have been able to gain access to that I know are accessible. But again, I don't think they're all inclusive of all, of what individuals may be interested in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? So I just want to remind everybody that we will send out the recording and the slides and materials that Terry will share. And also, please look in your email. There should be an evaluation for this session. So please reply to that. That would be very helpful for the project.
I
Yes.
see a question about grading.
Oh,
So
good. Okay.
and so someone asked me how can I say something about how I grade the students. So I use rubrics for every step of the way. I'll include them too. And so in terms of to try to standardize that there are certain competencies that students need to demonstrate through their work of being able to engage in a certain level of research, different data related tasks that I need for them to do, but then maybe also content specific tests, since I'm not really, all of this is not done within a data focused, statistically focused or driven course, but making sure that they're incorporating, if we're talking about public policy, that they're including those policy components in their research and in their narrative. So I'll include some of that, but I use a rubric to assess them at different, and there are milestones that they need to meet or like benchmark periods for grading. So it's not all or nothing for the final project. And so I will share that. So there's opportunities to improve.
Mm.
Usually if it's not a 5-day project, it can take, we take about a good month. So maybe like four weeks to do it. And so each week has its own activities.
And so do you always do those as groups or you do individual projects as well?
With my graduate students, my courses are small, so they tend to do them individually. With my
Mhm.
undergrad and also with some of my upperclassmen, the classes are small, so they have the option to work individually. Everyone, even if you work in a group, everyone is responsible for identifying their contributions and participating at every step of the milestone and performance. But yeah, if it's a larger class, they're going to be in groups. But if it's smaller, they can work individually.
Mhm. Mhm. All right, any last questions? All right, well, thanks so much, Terry.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for attending. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
May I ask a quick logistic questions? I think there were